I was sipping black coffee by the wide glass window of my apartment in Arlington, Virginia, when my phone buzzed against the marble counter. The autumn light spilled across the room, catching the framed shadow box of medals I kept half hidden on a shelf: bronze, silver, even the Distinguished Service ribbon I never bragged about. They were the only glitter in a life I kept quiet. To the world, I was just another middle-aged woman in a silk blouse and neatly pressed slacks, working as a quiet consultant. No one saw the wars I carried in my bones. The message glowed on my screen. The will has been settled. You're not included. For a moment, my breath caught. My own family, the people I had once written letters to from overseas, the ones whose birthdays I remembered while dodging mortar fire, had erased me like I was nothing more than a faded photograph. I let the phone rest in my hand, its hum still vibrating through my palm, and laughed softly, though it came out more like a scoff. 22 years in uniform. 22 years saluting flags, marching through sandstorms, pulling brothers in arms out of fire.
And now?
My so-called family reduced my worth to zero, with the stroke of a lawyer's pen. I adjusted the cuff of my blouse, feeling the faint scar beneath the fabric on my forearm. My reflection in the window looked calm, even elegant. But inside, an old fire sparked awake, the same fire that carried me through boot camp when no one believed I would last a week. They had erased me from the will. They thought it meant I had nothing. They had no idea what I was about to erase from them. I wasn't always this composed. At 21, I was just Amanda Grace Parker, the stubborn daughter of a middle-class family in Charlotte, North Carolina. My father ran a small auto shop, my mother volunteered at the church, and my siblings, Mark and Julia, were the stars. Mark with his business degree, Julia with her perfect smile and law school ambitions. And me? I was the black sheep who signed enlistment papers the week after college graduation. "You're throwing your life away," my mother hissed that night at dinner, her fork clattering against the plate. "The army is no place for a young woman. You'll come back broken if you come back at all." I remember gripping my water glass, so hard my knuckles ached. My father didn't even look at me. He just wiped his hands on a rag, sighed, and muttered, "You'll regret it." What they didn't see was the lump rising in my throat, the tremor in my hands. They didn't feel the way the word regret pressed against my ribs like a blade. I swallowed my tears that night, excused myself from the table, and packed a duffel bag with everything that mattered: a notebook, a photo of my grandmother, and the silver St. Michael pendant she had given me before she passed. "St. Michael defends the warriors," she used to whisper. "Carry this, and you'll never be alone." That pendant became my anchor. When my mother stopped speaking to me, when my father's disappointment settled like a shadow, when Mark smirked and told me I'd come crawling back broke and desperate, St. Michael was cool against my skin, steadying my heartbeat. The next morning, I boarded the bus to Fort Benning. My duffel weighed heavy, but my heart was heavier. As the miles rolled by, I stared out the window, watching familiar streets fade into open highway. I wasn't sure if I'd ever come back. Boot camp nearly broke me. My hands blistered from the pull-up bar, my legs screamed on ruck marches, and my drill sergeant's voice cut through me like lightning. But each time I faltered, I pressed my fingers against that pendant, felt its edges, and reminded myself, I wasn't just fighting for a career. I was fighting to prove them wrong. That was the night I decided. If my family couldn't see me, I would carve a life so undeniable, so resilient, that even their silence could never erase me. The army became my crucible. What began as survival turned into transformation. I rose before dawn, laced my boots, and ran until my lungs burned. I learned to fire weapons with precision, crawl through mud, and lead men twice my size without flinching. But it wasn't just about muscle, it was about grit. There were nights in Iraq when I pressed my cheek to the cool steel of an armored Humvee, listening to mortar shells whistle through the air. My pulse steadied not out of fearlessness, but discipline. Fear was a constant companion. I simply learned to walk beside it. Over the years, I earned my sergeant's stripes, then captain's bars. I led convoys, planned operations, and wrote letters of condolence when men I trained never came home. I still remember their names. They visit me in dreams sometimes, faces lit by desert sun. Loneliness was the quiet enemy. Birthdays passed with nothing but a melted chocolate bar from the mess tent. Holidays were phone calls cut short by static. I watched from afar as my siblings' lives unfolded. Weddings, babies, vacations splashed across social media. My mother never sent photos. My father never picked up the phone. I learned to stop expecting. But the army gave me something my family never did: respect. A commander once told me, "Captain Parker, you've got iron in your spine and fire in your chest. Don't you ever let anyone dim it." I carried those words like a second dog tag. After 22 years, I retired with honors and scars, some visible, most not. Civilian life was another battlefield, but I approached it with the same discipline. I invested wisely, started a private security consultancy, and slowly built a network of corporate clients who valued my strategic mind. Boardrooms replaced war rooms, but the mission was the same: lead, protect, adapt. The early years were brutal. I worked out of a cramped apartment answering phones myself, teaching night classes on leadership to pay rent. I second-guessed everything. Would clients trust a woman who carried a soldier's posture into a polished business world? Would they see me as more than a veteran with war stories? But small victories stacked up. The first major contract with a Fortune 500 company. The first time a CEO called me indispensable. The first quarter my bank account showed 6 figures. Through it all, I stayed invisible to my family. On Facebook, I posted modest updates: a coffee mug, a sunrise run, the occasional blurry photo of Washington monuments. Never the full picture. They thought I was just getting by. Truth was, I was building an empire in silence. Evenings, I'd sit in my office overlooking the Potomac, medals tucked away in a drawer, laptop glowing with spreadsheets and contracts. Some nights, I'd unclasp my St. Michael pendant and set it beside me on the desk. My grandmother's words echoed as I signed deals worth more than my father's entire business. Carry this, and you'll never be alone. I wasn't alone anymore. My comrades were brothers. My clients were allies. My own reflection in the glass, calm, resilient, undeniably successful, was enough. They had cut me out of their story, but I was writing mine, page by page, in ink they could never erase. The day they came, I let them wait. I could hear the knock at my penthouse door before my assistant opened it, polite, hesitant, like they weren't sure if the person behind the door could even be me. I adjusted the collar of my tailored blazer, smoothing down my silk blouse, and walked to the door. The autumn sunlight streamed in, catching the glint of my wedding ring, Style's silver watch, a gift from a mentor, not a husband. "Amanda?" My mother's voice trembled, laced with confusion and something else I couldn't name. Shame? Recognition? "Hello, Mom."
Mark.
"Julia," I said evenly, holding the door open wider. "Please come in." The apartment was a testament to a life they had never imagined I could have. Gleaming hardwood floors reflected the afternoon light. A massive framed print of a desert sunrise hung behind the sofa, a reminder of nights I spent far from home, guiding my unit through fire. My office was tucked to the side, filled with certificates, awards, and a bookshelf lined with contracts and corporate manuals. The aroma of roasted coffee beans and polished wood filled the space. They stepped inside, eyes darting from my minimalist furniture to the silver plaques on the shelves, the framed metals tucked behind a glass case. My mother's lips parted, but no words came. Mark's jaw clenched. Julia's fingers twisted nervously around her scarf. I let the silence stretch. I didn't need to speak yet. I wanted them to feel the weight of expectation, of their assumptions, colliding with reality. Then I began. I retired from the Army 2 years ago, after 22 years of service. I led teams in 3 different combat zones. I received multiple honors for bravery and leadership. I've since built a consultancy that works with Fortune 500 companies and private security firms. My net worth is substantial, more than enough to live comfortably, and then some. I watched as their expressions shifted. My mother's eyes went wide. Mark's lips pressed into a thin line. Julia's scarf twisted tighter. And yet, I continued, voice calm, I never expected your approval. Because for 22 years, you didn't even try to support me. You erased me from the will. You acted as though my life and achievements meant nothing. I let that hang in the air, thick and undeniable. I could have been bitter. I could have shown up with anger. But here's the truth. I built my life in spite of you. And in doing so, I erased your ability to control me. Your opinions, your approval, they no longer matter. Not a single one of them. They were speechless, rooted to the plush rug like deer caught in headlights. For the first time in decades, I saw fear, not of me, but of the reality they had ignored. I gestured to the living room. Welcome to the life you thought you had the power to erase. Every contract, every investment, every success, I achieved it without you. And now, if you want any part of me in your lives, you will see me as I am, not as you wish me to be. Mark's face paled. Julia's voice was barely audible. Amanda, I shook my head gently. No. You will listen first, and then we will see if this can be repaired. Because I'm not the girl you left behind anymore. I am the woman who carried herself through wars, through solitude, and through every disappointment you ever handed me. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was respectful. It was wary. And it was mine. They came expecting a broken daughter, a woman still chained to their judgment. Instead, they found Amanda Grace Parker, warrior, survivor, and untouchable in her strength. The room was quiet, the air thick with their unspoken shame. I leaned against the edge of my mahogany desk, letting them take in the details of my life. The sharp angles, the polished surfaces, the subtle indicators of power I'd built in secret. This isn't about money, I said finally. My voice was calm, measured, but it carried the authority earned through decades of discipline. It's about change. If you want a place in my life now, it won't be on your terms. It will be on mine. They looked at me like I'd grown taller overnight, and in a way I had. Not in inches, but in presence. Years of service, sacrifice, and independence radiated from every line of my posture. I will help, but there are conditions. Each of you must confront the parts of yourselves that hurt me and hold you back. I glanced at my mother. You will acknowledge that dismissing me hurt me, and you will actively support the people in your life, instead of just criticizing them. My father, ever stoic, shifted uncomfortably. And you? He asked, almost whispering. I want you to stop trying to control me through guilt or legacy. That ends today. Mark's eyes flicked to the floor. I've relied on the family to carry me, he admitted reluctantly. Good, I said. Then step up. Earn your own successes. Take responsibility for your life instead of clinging to what you think I owe you. Julia fiddled with her scarf, voice shaking. And me. You will leave behind toxic patterns, Julie. Whether it's your relationships, your friendships, or habits you've ignored, you will pursue a life that doesn't harm yourself or others. And you will do it sincerely, not just because I said so. I saw panic ripple through them, and I didn't flinch. My conditions weren't meant to punish. They were designed to awaken accountability. For 22 years, I'd been accountable to my country, to my comrades, and most importantly, to myself. Now they would meet that same standard. And one last thing, I said, pulling my St. Michael pendant from beneath my blouse and placing it on the desk. This isn't just about rules. This is about freedom. I've erased your power to control me. In turn, I'm giving you a chance to erase the things that hold you back. Do it honestly, and you'll earn more than my support. You'll earn yourselves. They nodded slowly, their shoulders slumping with relief and shame intermingled. I could see the beginnings of recognition, the spark that comes when someone finally confronts themselves. For the first time, they weren't speaking as my parents or siblings, they were listening as human beings facing truths they had avoided. I smiled faintly, almost tenderly. Compassion and firmness intertwined. I had the upper hand, yes, but not for pride. For growth. For healing. For freedom. This was the power shift. Not just mine. All of us, in a way, were about to learn what it meant to be truly free. Weeks passed, and the changes were slow, but visible. My mother called me one evening, hesitating at first, then finally speaking her gratitude aloud. She volunteered at a local veterans charity in my name, learning to give without judgment. Mark started his own small business, stumbling at first, but with genuine effort. Julia moved out of the relationship that had drained her spirit, her confidence returning like sunlight after rain. I watched from my apartment, St. Michael's pendant resting against my heart, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the empty kind, but the kind that comes from knowing you survived the storms, endured the silence, and emerged whole. There were still moments when memories of combat, loneliness, and rejection surfaced, but they no longer carried shame. They were proof of my resilience. The woman I had become, the soldier, the strategist, the independent force, was the one who had rewritten the narrative they tried to erase. I often sat by my window, looking out at the Potomac, the medals tucked away, but never forgotten. I traced the edges of the silver pendant and remembered my grandmother's words, "Carry this, and you'll never be alone." And I wasn't. Never had been. It wasn't just about my family learning lessons. It was about me reclaiming the life they thought they could control. About turning hurt into empowerment, rejection into strategy, and silence into influence. I realized, in a way, I had given them freedom as well. The freedom to confront themselves, to grow, and to finally recognize the value of respect and effort over entitlement. And as I signed papers for a scholarship fund I'd established for young women entering the military, I whispered to no one but myself, smiling softly, "I am no one's shadow. I am my own legacy. I serve no one but the truth I've earned and the life I choose to lead." The wind brushed against the window, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves. I stood tall, shoulders back, eyes clear. My journey had been long, and the battles weren't over. But the victory was mine, fully, finally, and irrevocably. I was Amanda Grace Parker. Soldier. Survivor.
Free.